Hello, welcome back to Scriversphere. Okay, again we are back again with my new horror series, talking about some of the best horror franchises out there. Today's video, we are talking about A Nightmare on Elm Street franchise series. This is the movie series for me that defined that loopy, doopy, crazy horror that we get sometimes from now and then. This sort of started that, fermented that in this film series. So we're going to be talking about it today. I'm going to go into it. There's not any talk of a timeline sort of thing with this one. They're all pretty much tied together, except for one single film, maybe two, but that's it. So let's get started with A Nightmare on Elm Street. Yes, guys, so yeah, we're talking about A Nightmare on Elm Street. Welcome back to Scriversphere. I am Ryan, that humble host of yours. So, let's get started. There are 9 films in this series. And, it's very different from Halloween. And it's very different for a slasher film series. But it's a difference that you enjoy and love at the same time. There is only one of these films that I absolutely hate. The rest I enjoy and have fun with, and for the majority of the time can have, that sort of fun with a horror series as much as you can kind of feeling. So let's get started with number 9 on the list, and that is of course the remake. I'm not going to talk much about this because I'm not a big fan. It's the only one I don't like. Now, it's not a bad film altogether, but when you look at what Robert Englund did with his Freddy Krueger in comparison to what Jackie Earle Haley did in this film, it really tarnishes what came before. As I said, I'm not going to go really in depth with a lot of these early ones on the list because, for me, the ones early on the list, except for one, are really hard to distinguish between. But I will give a good enough reason as I possibly can as to why I put it where I put it. But for me, this is the absolute worst of the Nightmare on Elm Street films. Again, not a bad film, but it has its problems at its core. The storyline, the script. The storyline is actually quite concrete and sort of follows the original, but there's a lot to sort of nod your head at and think, why are they doing this? Why is it a load of shit? As remakes go, it's probably not the worst remake out there. For me, the worst remake... Okay, this is the worst remake, but it's not the worst in a series of films where somebody else has taken on the mantle. For me, that is Halloween 2. Rob Zombie. So, yeah, number 9 is that A Nightmare on Elm Street remake. So, at number 8, and again, it's a love-hate relationship with this one. It is probably, again, cemented into my memory as being one of the first ones I can remember watching, and it's Freddys Dead. Understandably, you can see why I've put this so low on the list. I think a lot of people will have these two at the bottom. Some may put Freddys Dead at the very bottom, but for me, it's a Robert Englund Freddy that you absolutely can enjoy. There's a lot to like in this film, but then again, there's a lot to hate. It sort of comes away from what we've had before in a massive way. But it doesn't completely tarnish the idea of the story. So my number 8 spot is Freddys Dead. My number 7 spot is maybe a controversial one, but for me, it's not that I don't like this one, because I do, but it has problems for me. And it's one that I always seem to forget about when I rewatch, and that is the second A Nightmare on Elm Street film, Freddys Revenge, I believe they called it. For me, that has troubles. That has problems in itself that I can't really give any credit to. I still find it better than Freddys Dead to a certain extent. And you still get that Robert Englund Freddy that, we all love to hate. Or we all love to love, in some cases. But for me, I can't put this any higher. It starts off the series with that loopy side, and it's a sequel that makes sense. It's a sequel that does right by the original, and it makes sense because at the end of the first film, you get this sort of thing where it's like Freddy's been, sort of forgotten, and he wants to come back and he wants to get back into this sort of, like back to the way he was, but he can't do it on his own, and that's why he uses the main character of the second film. But for me, it's just not one that, I sort of remember like the rest, and that's why I had to put this one as low as I have. As I say, it could be very controversial, but this is just my list, just my opinion. As I've said in the past, everyone gets their own opinion on everything different, on what we all talk about today. But for me, that second Nightmare on Elm Street just doesn't, for me, do it as well as the others. So, at number 6, and this is where I start to get a little bit fuzzy. My number 6 spot, my number 4 spot, I get mixed up between. So that might give you a rough idea what my number 4 spot is later. But this one is Dream Child. Again, it's not one that I directly remember, but I have fond memories of. I do enjoy it. As I say, there's not a lot of these films that I don't enjoy. I'd say most likely it's just that remake. Complete shit. But, for me, Dream Child, it sort of had like this Nightmare on Elm Street series sort of did what the Myers series of Halloween films did. 4, 5 and 6 are its own story. 3, 4 and 5 are a Nightmare on Elm Street's own story in a way, but it's still all in the same timeline. Again, there's not a timeline to talk about except for the 2 key distractions. So yeah, again, when it comes to number 4, I won't be talking much of it, but my number 6 spot is Dream Child. So, my number 5 spot, and I really debated on whether to put this into this list or do a separate video. So this film will come up in another video in this horror series. You can guess which film I'm talking about here. But my number 5 spot is Freddy vs. Jason. Freddy vs. Jason is a good film. Don't get me wrong. It's actually more enjoyable than the earlier films, I think. But for me, again, I can't put it any higher. It sort of struggles with what it had. It's like the Alien vs. Predator. That's hard for me to put that in a series of films. That'll also give you a clue as to what I might do down the line. But for me, Freddy vs. Jason really struggled to sort of balance the 2 characters. It's definitely more of a sort of Freddy film than a Jason film, but Jason's at the forefront of it. Freddy has been completely forgotten, and he awakens Jason. So this is where it distincts from the original series of Jason films. But it keeps the connection with the Freddy films. It's more of a Freddy film than a Jason film, as I've just said. But they do this sort of thing where, Freddy wakens Jason from death, and he tries to get Jason to sort of do these killings and have people scared that it might be Freddy again going back, which is a little bit confusing. But, about 85 to 90% of the time, Jason is at the forefront of this story and Freddy's in the background. But, again, it does well with what it's got. And what you expect from a versus film that you wouldn't normally expect it to come. You expect maybe And I know this is dodgy because it's the same actor, but you expect there to be a sort of Rambo versus Rocky style film out there somewhere. Some crazy idiot might make it. You know, any companies out there that have just heard that and make it, remember, Squivosphere, just put me in the credits. You don't have to pay me. But that one, for me, you know, this film for me is a troubling one. As I said, I could have done more with it, but I enjoy it all the less. So that's my number 5 spot. Before we continue, sorry, I'm hearing noises. Before we continue, the usual. Please like, comment and subscribe on my channel. It is much appreciated. And click that notification bell if you want to be notified when my videos are uploaded. Let's continue. And we are back. Okay, so on with the list. So yeah, we left with number 5 being Freddy vs. Jason. We're now going into number 4, which again, as I said during number 6, is not one that I can massively remember, but for me it is still better than Freddy vs. Jason, and that's Dream Master. Now, the problem I have with Dream Master and Dream Child at the same time is that they're the same film. Same with the Return and the Revenge of the Michael Myers films. They feel like the same films to me, but I remember them. Dream Master and Dream Child, you know, they're on par now. I know that Dream Child came after Dream Master, I'm sure of that. So that's maybe why I like it more. But for me, that's why it gets my number 4 spot. It's just not as memorable. You know, I can remember Freddy vs. Jason through and through, but it's not as good. I know that. I know that for certain. So, yeah, my number 4 spot goes to Dream Master. Dream Master. I can't talk today. My number 3 spot, again, might be controversial. I don't see many people putting this as high as I've put it. Simply because of what it did and what it is. Wes Craven's A New Nightmare. This film, for me, I know it gets a lot of hate in the Freddy sort of series. But I loved it. I enjoy it. The whole meta sort of side of it. Eva Langenkamp comes back, but not as Nancy in this one, but as herself. She's had a son, and she, you know, she's overseen the new Freddy film, and it all goes to shit. But this is not a Freddy Krueger film. It is not Freddy Krueger. That does get pointed out at the end when he dies. He has the horns and the monster. You know, it's the demon. It's the sort of presence of Freddy at times, but it is not Freddy. It's not Robert Englund. I mean, it is Robert Englund. It's him. It looks like him, and it is him. But it is not the Freddy that we all know and love. He's in the trench coat. He's got the hat. He's got 5 sharp fingernails now. I'm just going to call them fingernails. But you know, it does a lot, and I do enjoy it. And it's one that I look forward to when I watch it, knowing that it's the last in the series of films when you watch them in order, and then you go into that shitty remake. It's one that gives you that sort of breath of fresh air before you get into the shit. So yeah, that's the reason why I've put New Nightmare as my number 3 spot. Now, these two films I've struggled to put where I wanted to, because I mean, you know, and I don't mean to say that my first list has affected my choice here, but for the top 2, you know, it's definitely different from what I did with the Michael Myers Halloween series of films. So my second on the list is the original A Nightmare on Elm Street. Again, a lot of people will put this at the top of their series of films. You know, their lists will be completely different from mine, I'll tell you now. Especially after Freddys Dead, I think. Everything's all over the place. But, again, it's in my opinion. That original Nightmare on Elm Street did so good. You know, it again, starts a series. Freddy is a lot more serious. You don't get that comedy Freddy yet. That comes in at number 2, and then it's sort of staked in at number 3 with Dream Warriors. But for me, A Nightmare on Elm Street is an absolute brilliant horror film through and through. You get that crazy ending where it's like, you know, they've defeated Freddy, but then he's back all of a sudden and he's got a little bit of power still. He doesn't kill Nancy because we see her later on, but she's obviously in a dream state there, and it's just sort of strange to watch. And you get that stupid dummy of her mom going through the window, which is quite funny when you watch it. But you know, it adds such iconic kills that you always remember, like the bed. The bed scene is an iconic death scene in any horror film. You think of horror films and their death scenes, and for me, and this is not contradicting my first thing, this does not make it my favourite horror, but for me, that death scene with the bed and Johnny Depp goes in and blood comes out, shoots out everywhere, all over the walls, he's dead. No one survives that. For me, was brilliant. That, for me, is what shows the strengths of this series. And, you know, as I say, it set it up for what was to come, which is a brilliant franchise. But of course, my number one spot has to go to this one, and it's, again, this is the one that I always remember watching, and this is the one that I always remember watching the most of. This is my favourite, and that's Dream Warriors. Dream Warriors is an absolutely brilliant film, and I'll tell you why. It doesn't show it from the story of Freddy. None of them do, to be fair. You know, you get glimpses of Freddy's past. But, you know, for me, the remake was the Freddy story. They could have called it the Freddy story. They could have easily called it that. And it would still be a pile of shit. But anyway, Dream Warriors took that idea of you can control your dreams to an extent. If he can do whatever the bloody hell he wants, it's his world. It's Freddy Krueger's world when you are asleep. But that doesn't mean to say you can't control it as much. Having a character who can control and, you know, essentially kill off Freddy for good, and he gets taken away by number 6. But and obviously it continues through to 4 and 5. But for me, it is the top tier of the Nightmare on Elm Street films. Welcome to primetime, bitch. You know, you get these perfect one-liners from Freddy Krueger, and as I say, where I said that it's sort of starting number 2 with the kookiness, for me, personally, this is where it started, that Freddy Krueger side that we all know and love. So, that's my list. Again, there's not a lot more to talk about. The only thing I'll say now is that I do love this series, but it's not the Halloween series to me. The Halloween series is the absolute top tier. The next horror franchise in this series will be Friday the 13th. Now, there are so many films, there are 13 films, and there are only about 4 or 5 where I know what order they're going and where they are and what they do. One of which is Jason X. So that is my next list. That will come very soon, but I've got to do some research before I get into that, because a lot of the films meld together, especially in between. Especially with, like, from number 3 to, like, you know, you get some beats that are the same, like 3 and 4, I think, are the 2 that confuse me the most when I come to think of the series. But that's my video. You know, I know it wasn't as long as my Halloween one. Of course, there's less films in this series, but for me, the Halloween series is the best. Friday the 13th comes second best to me when it comes to the horror franchises. So after Friday the 13th will be Chucky, the Chucky series, Child's Play series, whatever you want to call it. That one I'll get into for my 4th video. From there on after, my horror franchises will be all over the place. So don't expect me to cover Camp Blood or any other horror series that maybe I haven't seen. But it'll be all over the place. It'll have a different style of horror. You've got the alien style of horror, the zombie style of horror, which I cannot wait to get into the zombie horror style. Naming my top 10 horror zombie films, that's maybe where I'll go with that list. But it'll all be in my horror series, which we're starting here. So, I'm not going to be sticking to this with just October. You may find that you'll get some of these videos in November. But for me, the 4 top ones for me, going in the order of the ones I love the most, to the ones, that are stuck with me anyway, but aren't the best. Halloween, Friday the 13th. I'm sorry. Halloween, Nightmare on Elm Street, Friday the 13th, and Child's Play. Thereafter, it'll be all over the place. Thanks for watching. I've been Scrivo. This has been Scrivosphere, and I'll see you next time.